Wow, this is a high maintenance production set. All right. Hello, everyone. Ciao. This is the drink of the day. Since I last took a video, I got the flu and a sinus infection and a mini surgery and an SD card that won't work for my camera and my nails done. And this epic jacket. Yeah. And we're going to be talking about Babel today by R.F. Kuang. I actually went to a book club about this and whoa, was it scary. If you didn't already know, Babel is a historical fantasy novel set in the 1830s at Oxford. It's written by R.F. Kuang. It follows Robin Swift, a Canton-born orphan who was taken by his white father, Professor Lovell, from cholera-ridden China to England. There, he trains to become a student at the Royal Institute of Translation at Oxford University. In this fantasy version of the 19th century, the world's technological advancement and industrial revolution is led primarily by England, where silver is used by the translation alumni pseudo-magic translation and incantation to power the tech around them. By engraving 2 or more words on these silver bars in 2 different languages, the user can evoke a reaction. The reaction is fed by the lost translation that occurs between the 2 words that are written. For example, invisibility in English paired with wuxing in Chinese, meaning intangible, allows the holder of the bar to become invisible. Or dissolve in English paired with, in Sanskrit, will disperse a crowd. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce words in other languages, I'm sorry. So in order for this magic to function, the speaker must be a fluent speaker of both languages. Which, not really explained in the book, but what level do you have to surpass to reach true fluency? Because of course I'm fluent in English, but I don't know every single word in English. And they study etymology in here to become fluent and to be able to use the history of linguistics to work this magic, but I don't know that in my language. So like, at what level does the magic decide you are fluent enough in both of these languages for this to work? Just a thought, I wonder. That's what the students of the Royal Institute of Translation are doing there. They are using their native languages, English, and the ancient classical languages that they studied in as children, led by their guardians, and the curriculum at the Institute to pass their fluency exams and become tools of the British Empire to reinforce their power and control over competing countries. While becoming a ruthless empire of silver mining, the elite class maintain control over the educated minority, foreigners who are welcome in the Institute as long as they do not criticize the colonization required for the silver magic system, the racism they face, and basically anything offensive to the white people in charge. Very quickly, the unspoken rule of stay in line and do not speak if spoken to is learned by the cast of the non-white characters, and while they do defend themselves against their fellow students on occasion, and engage in classes with professors who have a passion for the foreign qualities of foreign languages but not much else foreign, they are constantly reminded of their place in a racist society and the subservient nature they must conform to in order to retain their privileges of studying at the university. After all, the white elite in history and the novel are accepting of the people and product of the other as long as they can profit from it and keep them subjugated. So the upkeep of the silver bar technology is not only a product of the subjugation, but is willfully kept in a cycle of obsolescence so that any bar that is installed, zoomies, must be repowered in the future, otherwise it fails. And to keep bridges from falling or keep carts motorized, this must be done. Of course, this unsustainable element was made so that the white educated elite capitalize on the industry and make more profit. And capitalism and imperialism have historically relied on the exploitation of foreigners and their hard work, with little to no regard for their humane treatment. This powerful message of Babel is not lost upon the readers, and thematically the novel is rich, needs to be recognized for its commentary on colonialism and the power translation has and does have in dividing and unifying people of all countries in many aspects, and how it can be used by people in power to keep other people beneath them. Well, I loved this book on my first read and was excited to delve into a linguistic-heavy novel and appreciate the detail and depth of etymology and history. There are a few critiques I have after rereading the novel this year. Unfortunately, I think the novel had some more potential in areas that I wish had been explored more. My first critique is about characters. We are introduced to the Golden Trio +1. We have Robin, Victoire, Rami, and Letty. They all speak English and learn ancient languages necessary for the Institute, like Greek, but Robin speaks Mandarin and— Bless you, Charlie! Goodness! Mandarin and Cantonese, although he's told immediately to forget Cantonese because it's a lesser language. Anyway, Rami was born in Calcutta and speaks Persian, Urdu, and Arabic. He was taken from his family by Sir Horace Wilson to live in Yorkshire before attending Babel. He is the stereotypically biting character of the group, characterized by a sharp sense of understanding and the bitterness that comes with being attuned to one's surroundings. He's usually treated worse than Robin because Robin often in society can pass as white in some circumstances, and Rami has a familiar understanding of colonialism since he's from India, where the British Empire colonized. Victoire was born in Haiti and speaks Haitian, Creole, and French. She spent a lot of time in France before going to Babel, and as a Black woman attending the university, she was victim to racism, misogyny, and sexism. And even the only woman professor at the school told her that her position at the school was not an inspiration of overcoming a society that disregarded women and believed them incapable of education, but rather a sole product of her hard work. So she discounts the experiences of Victoire and at the same time belittles Victoire's aspirations in a society where she's obviously ridiculed and overlooked often. Sabrina, baby. Then we have Letty. She was born in England and speaks French and German. She's the only white character of the group, and it's made obvious over and over that Letty does not have the capacity to think critically or realize the depth in which her friends experience racism and are ostracized from society, except in the most shallow of ways. She's actually more concerned with feeling ostracized herself, feeling left out of their bonded experiences, despite also feeling the effects of misogyny in society and overcoming the challenge of attending Oxford as a woman when both her father and society were not keen on the idea. Unfortunately, the characters feel a bit stereotypical, as narrative devices meant solely for delivering lines of the message necessary to the plot, but without complex motivations, feelings, or dynamics. Their interactions were painfully reminiscent of another media and felt like a shadow in the background of the plot, which leads me to my next critique, which is Babel, often read as a Harry Potter-inspired novel, but with poor execution in the way it resembled. And I'm sorry, please don't hate, okay? Let me explain. So, first we have the Golden Trio of Robin, Rami, and Victoire, +1 with Letty. With Robin being the burdened and unsure chosen one, meant to lead a revolution against the oppressive regime threatening the oppressed half-bloods and muggleborns. You know, the oppressed people. Rami being the boisterous and opinionated sidekick that at least thankfully did not read as a Ron copy. And Victoire, the aspirational woman who's told she is not meant to be part of a society that sees her as undeserving of her station, despite her intellect and right, comparable to Hermione and her muggleborn status. Additionally, the two-sentence hint of romantic interest between Robin and Rami shadows a brother bond of Harry and Ron that leaves Victoire, Hermione, feeling like she belongs in the trio, but will fall third in an argument seen as too bold when the two are both, one, not a woman seeking support when her two best friends are boys, and two, not facing the intersectional struggle of being both a woman and Black, or woman and Muggle-born, in society. So despite the golden trio dynamic going on, we have the obvious academic living arrangement comparable to Hogwarts, with academic rivalry most notably against the rich elite white kids that are only at Babel because they are expected to be entering in a cozy career afterwards that have already been warmed for them. We've got the classes and the adventures that give them a bond that makes the readers care for them. Sorry, I wouldn't mean that last sentence, but the adventures we have in this novel is strictly a few paragraphs every so often telling us that the trio cook their favorite dishes together, laugh into the night, and share conversation, but doesn't really go much deeper than that. And that's what I'm missing in addition. I'm missing the fantastical element that comes with a fantasy novel where you're led on a suspenseful journey with the characters, where you like dodge curses or sneak out into the night to free a strange bird. But here the sneaking out occurs, but not in a way that gives you a sense of bonding friendship in the face of death, or mending of those bonds in heightened situations. It leaves the reader wanting. What it also lacks in that regard is the time meant to develop said Harry Potter dynamic and cataclysm reaction of betrayal that happens in the novel, because the novel, 550 pages of dry academic studying and sneaking, and I didn't say I didn't enjoy the dry linguistic essay part of it. It's rushed. Yeah, I know I just said a 550-page novel is rushed, but time skips are abound in this novel, and since it opens with a child version of Robin venturing to England, we're not expected to be privy to every single day of his life until his entrance into Oxford University. But for the characters to feel real and the betrayal of one character in particular to feel shocking, we should be allowed some momentous and emotionally heavy tension between the characters that come with dialogue, rising and falling action, and periods of nostalgic rest that will connect with the readers and make them feel like a ghost on the shoulder of the characters. By far, the most interesting characterization is the hint of romantic feelings between Robin and Rami in two instances. I'm gonna quote specifically from this because I really think that this is like some of the parts that shine, but like these are the only real, I mean, maybe there was like their first meeting, but these are like the only two moments that we actually see kind of a relationship that connects the characters in a deeper way than their inherent struggle. Light made Rami's eyes glow, made his skin shine like burnished bronze. Robin had the absurd impulse to place his hand against Rami's cheek. Indeed, he'd half lifted up his arm before his mind caught up with his body. And then when discussing Letty's interest in Rami, Robin, she wants you, very badly, so why? Rami, don't you know why? Their eyes met. Robin felt a prickle at the back of his neck. The space between them felt very charged, like the moment between lightning and thunder, and Robin had no idea what was going on or what would happen next, only that it all felt very strange and terrifying, like teetering over the edge of a windy, roaring cliff. By far, this is the most subtle the book is, and I wish it were honestly a little more subtle while simultaneously appreciating the one thing I see as a complex dynamic amidst these characters. Hey, Sabrina. Whoopsie. Often, the academic year would fly by, and I mean it would fly by as in it would say the academic year flew by, and then they're all of a sudden finals. And then he would spend a summer abroad. That would be told in a paragraph or two without having the experience of spending the summer abroad. So we're basically told the passing of time, but we don't really feel it. I have seen some authors do this characterization extremely well, like over a period of years with dialogue and with characterization that gives the characters a three-dimensional quality. It gives the readers a sense of nostalgia when thinking back on the characters' experiences, and here I was definitely let down. I understand that the author is rushing towards the plot, but it felt rushed when it had more potential. The ending 200 pages had the most tension and interest, but it made what came before seem both heavy with words and light with significance. In this novel, there was little gray morality to be had and little philosophy to be discussed until the end, unless you're talking about their philosophical conversations with themselves, which really just sounded like things that could be picked out and used as a quote rather than things that would make you think about your response, if that makes sense. So, little philosophy to be discussed until the end when you must decide if revolution can occur peacefully or with violence. Professor Lovell, as one of the white elites in the book, would obviously be filled with hate and make the reader aware of his participation in corrupt and racist ideology, but the characters miraculously were already clued into the good versus evil of the world, free from their own mistakes, all knowing in the realm of misogyny and racism, or no knowing in the case of Letty. There was a potential for a complex discussion of inherent racism or misogyny, or for Letty's character to engage and then fall short. Rather, Letty did not engage at all, and her betrayal was predictable since her introduction. She was just another evil white character that cannot be trusted. And while I think that's accurate for the time period and the message, I can't help but appreciate the conversation that could have been had if her betrayal had more emotional hurt in it. Like, Letty sucks. We hate Letty, and she's an important character to have in a book, but no gray morality here at all, which I think is typical of dark academia specifically. I don't know. So we knew Letty did not and would not understand them and the necessity for change, whether violent or not, and it stated very early on. Later, when everything went sideways and the world broke in half, Robin would think back to this day, to this power at this table, and wonder why they had been so quick, so carelessly eager to trust one another. Why had they refused to see the myriad ways they could hurt each other? Why had they not paused to interrogate the differences in birth and raising that meant they were not and could never be on the same side? But the answer was obvious, that they were all four of them drowning in the unfamiliar, and they saw in each other a raft, and clinging to one another was the only way to stay afloat. And that's my next critique. Telling instead of showing becomes foreshadowing, becomes, I know how it all ends at the beginning of the book. Don't get me wrong. A book about colonialism and racism will need to have racism. It is important, maybe even every 5 pages. And it was every 5 pages when I started making tabs about the racism. And I have no problem with that. What I do have a problem with is how a statement will be made in this book, and without letting us sit with it and engage in thought, the next sentence will explain what the previous one meant, with no nuance. It will explain what it meant, why it was there, what it stood for, and the exact motivation behind it without any participation by the reader. There's no need to infer a character motivations when it's literally spelled out the sentence after a character's behavior. No need to have the reader reflect on their own ideology or emotions when reading words that evoke strong emotions, or wonder how the previous sentence will move the characters and pathways for the plot, because it does become very cut and dry predictable. This partly could be due to the hyper intent on historical accuracy that can make creativity less easily woven into the story. And while I enjoy linguistics, so I didn't mind the dry academic essay quality or the philosophical musings of the professors or the students at times, it didn't give me a reason to care about the characters more than they're treated awfully. I hate that society is hateful and full of racist bigotry. The novel is more of a message and less of a character-driven story. So in the face of all of the stuff that's happening, if I look at this only as a novel that's meant to inspire a message, I think it's wonderful, 5 out of 5. If we're talking about having both the message and the draw to the characters and the characters being real 3-dimensional people, that's where I'm disappointed. So, lack of subtlety, lack of morally gray aspects present in most dark academia that would let readers discover their own questions, contemplate their own behavior, and the nuances. The message was not packaged in between the lines, but rather was the lines, and it was the characters speaking the message because that was their only purpose. Not fleshed out in moments except to really contribute to the plot. And that's why this really read to me very black and white with good versus evil. No morally gray philosophy, which I think would have perfectly fit with the dark academia vibe. I think that The Secret History is the dark academia novel for me because it has philosophy and it has morally gray questions that make you think about life and think about elitism and classism, but it was lacking the diverse cast that Babel has. And I just think that this one falls short for me in that regard. Again, it doesn't have the same purpose as a book. Anyway, I also think that there were some things just in this novel for effect. Which police officer gave Letty, a white woman, a gun and let her run into a crime scene to say some words to her friends? Former friends. Like, explaining why she betrayed them and then let her fire the weapon? Who allowed a woman to hold a gun and learn how to shoot it in this time period? This novel was researched, thematic, the message was right and important, and what the characters represent is important, interesting concepts, but it just felt like it had more potential. I wanted to see snippets of the the Hermes Society's impact without really knowing who the Hermes Society is yet. You could sprinkle in, you know, his friends went off, and you'd be like, where's his friends going? You know what I'm saying? Just to be shocked to learn that they were actually part of the organization. It doesn't really come as a shock. Basically, nothing that happens in this book comes as a shock because it's all foreshadowed. Or straight up told. Like in the beginning of the novel when he's like, I would look back on this and I would know that we never could have existed as friends. It's like, bro, you could have put that later and we could have had the nostalgic effect of them eating together or whatever the situation was without spelling out what's gonna happen. I loved the parallel between Robin and his older brother Griffin, showing how Professor Lovell's treatment of the boys differed and how they became different people with different ideas and different views on how to act in the face of oppression. Their argument on if violence was a necessity and the development of Robin as a revolutionary character was so important, but I felt like his 360 ideology felt really rushed because it happened like in the last 200 pages of the book. I do think it makes sense. In this part, I wouldn't fight over it. Like, I wouldn't die on a hill for this particular moment because there are some things that happen at the end of the book that I'm like, I could totally see him switching his ideology here. But I wish we got to sit with it a little more just because I like sitting with things. Well, that's my critique. Keep in mind the author studied at Oxford. She's a translator herself, has an MPhil in Chinese Studies from Cambridge and an MSc in Contemporary Chinese Studies from Oxford. She's currently pursuing a PhD in East Asian languages and literatures at Yale University. And she's only 28 years old with a critically acclaimed book. And I'm sitting here on the ground with an antioxidant sparkling water beverage. And that's what I have to my name. So I'm a picky reader and I also like discussing books, so that's why I'm here. And I very much gave this book 5 out of 5 stars my first read, despite the fact that the magic system is only a replacement for technology rather than an addition to it. This book was one I read twice, willingly, because I enjoyed it. So let me know what you thought if you read this book. Let me know if I'm crazy. I'll see you on my next video discussing the house of my mother and how family vloggers are evil and how we should have better protections for child employees. Or no child employees at all. How about that? Okay. Alright, thank you for watching. Remember, I have a Patreon. I'd like to give a special shout out to Eric. Thank you, Eric. I'd like to shout out Eric, Kyle, Annabelle, and Trevor for being my best supporters on this channel. See you next